Tell us what you think. In person, over the phone, online. Watch and hear yourself on TV. You tell us, we air it. This is The Local Live.
Hello and welcome to The Local Live on this Thursday evening, January 15th. I'm Anthony Carlo.
And I'm Sasha Mollis. We're bringing you the only news show covering the Mamaroneck, Larchmont, and Rhinebeck communities.
Let's take a look at the stories we have tonight. Later on, our roundtable discusses immigration. Is this the civil rights movement of our time? Stay tuned for a live discussion.
And what happened this week in Larchmont and Mamaroneck? We'll tell you this week's municipal meeting highlights.
And for our sports fans, this week's LMC TV Varsity Sports Play of the Week.
Find out more about the new executive order on immigration and how the Hispanic Resource Center can help you.
Love dancing? We highlight a Zumba instructor in our area.
And let's help Lacey find a new forever home.
On January 12th, the Larchmont Board of Trustees voted in favor of a new law increasing the fines for 7:30 p.m. parking time limits, as well as a certain off-street lot parking without a permission violations.
To the Board of Trustees, you have before you a local law entitled Increasing Fines for Parking in Excess of Time Limits on Certain Streets and for parking without displaying a valid meter or parking license in certain off-street parking lots. All those in favor of passing this local law, say aye.
Can I have a motion in a second? Or not?
No, I thought we had a motion.
No?
I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 In other Larchmont news, the proposal to establish a village administrator position is still pending. No decisions have been made.
And over in the village of Mamaroneck, the Board of Trustees meeting had a Facebook policy on the agenda this week. The board decided that only not-for-profit advertising is allowed on the village of Mamaroneck's page. These postings must be used strictly for communication with the village and its residents.
All Board of Trustee members who are on Facebook are currently administrators of that page. And it is not the Board of Trustees' job to ensure all communications are gotten out to the village. We are another resource, but that's the village manager's job. And so in order to entrust him and to enable him to do his job more effectively, the social media policy enables him to use that avenue as another means to disseminate information on behalf of the village of Mamaroneck, so that it's not in full control of the board as it is today. The board that does control that page today does not have a formal guideline as to what information should be shared there. So a lot of information that is shared there is not necessarily village announcement material. And it should strictly be used for village announcements as another means to reach residents.
Remember, you can visit our website at lmctv.org to watch the full meetings.
Here comes our weekly segment, In the Media. Find out what's trending this week online in our local newspapers.
The Mamaroneck Daily Voice reports that 3 Rhinebeck High School football players were recently named Class C All-State players by the New York State Sports Writers Association. Our congratulations to senior running back Dom Brescia, Jake Severin, and Chris Reichart. Read more in The Voice. Laura Ariki, a student at Mamaroneck High School, is the winner of the One Book, One Mamaroneck Community Essay Contest sponsored by the League of Women Voters. In the spirit of the book, I Am Malala, Laura wrote about her mentor, Carlos, who inspired her to succeed in school and help others. The Larchmont Ledger has the details. From the Patch, news that Shrek the Musical is coming to Hommock School next month. 120 students from the 6th, 7th, and 8th grades comprise the cast. Says their press release, come sing along with Shrek, Fiona, Donkey, and a wide cast of characters as they learn the nature of real beauty and reinvent the concept of heroism. Tickets can be purchased online starting January 16th. The website is homicsmusical.com. And finally, Mamaroneck High School's Autism Awareness Club held a special concert at the school just before the holidays. As reported in The Loop, former Mayor Liz Field was the guest of honor. Feld is now the president of Autism Speaks. The concert was an evening of music performed by the high school students, and it raised over $8,000 for Autism Cares. Congratulations to the Awareness Club, President Natalie Spangle, Vice President Dana Herbstman, and all the other members. Read more about it in The Loop. Well, these are just a few of the stories that caught my eye this week in the media. For the Local Live, I'm Mike Witch.
We are going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, our immigration discussion will start.
Hello there. We here at The Local Live want to be your main source for staying current with news happening in the Larchmont Mamaroneck community. With that in mind, we'd like to take the time to establish what The Local Live can and can't do.
Can The Local Live inform me about upcoming community events?
Yes, we'll let you know about all the upcoming parades and fairs and have coverage of it to watch in case you missed it.
Can The Local Live cover what's going on in our local government?
Yes, we offer in-depth coverage of the local government and school board meetings in the Larchmont Mamaroneck area and frequently have sit-downs with our elected officials.
Hey, can The Local Live tell me exactly where in my body the aliens put the microchip?
No, sorry, we can't do that.
Can The Local Live keep me up to speed with local high school sports?
Yes, we can. We'll have the highlight reels from all the Panthers and Tigers games.
Can The Local Live give my pet ostrich the power of human speech?
What? No, of course not.
Can The Local Live cover local businesses?
Yes, we can. We've done profiles of numerous local businesses, and we'll cover more in the future.
The Local Live, can you confirm my suspicions that Bigfoot lives in the harbor? I've seen him.
Can we cut his feed, please?
Hey, no, cut be silent. Truth be revealed. Anyway.
If you want more news about local government, businesses, high school sports, and everything going on in town, tune to The Local Live, Thursday nights at 7:30 on Channel 75 if you have Cablevision, and Channel 36 for Verizon customers. And remember, we want to hear from you, the home viewer. Tell us what you think in person, online, or over the phone.
Immigration is the topic of this roundtable. Now, immigration as a rights movement, a reform movement, a reality. I'm Maura Carlin along with Mike Witch, and we hope you join the conversation.
And as always, you can call or tweet or email a question or a comment. The contact information will appear on your screen from time to time during our discussion. Maura?
We have a DREAM, a DACA, and now the IAEA. Now, the DREAM Act is the proposed federal legislation, development, relief, and education for alien minors. DACA is not a vacation home in Russia, but the program Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And IAEA refers to the Immigration Accountability Executive Action issued by President Obama last fall. It offers deportation relief to certain immigrants who are presently here undocumented. We'll talk about the local impact of these reforms and more with our guests. Zoe Colon is the Executive Director of the Hispanic Resource Center here in Mamaroneck. Guisela Marroquin is an organizer for the New York Civil Liberties Union. And Karin Anderson is an attorney specializing in immigration issues. Thank you for joining us. Zoe, I'm going to start with you. Why is immigration reform important here in Mamaroneck?
Well, so we do need comprehensive immigration reform that would impact the entire family. We've looked at different pieces of legislation that would, for example, benefit young people, childhood arrivals, for example, but we have yet to pass a comprehensive immigration reform. And it's important to our community so that folks who are living in fear and don't have work authorization and who live in fear every single day because they're in fear of being, deported, they can actually come out of the shadows. They're already contributing to the economy and to the tax base, but they would be able to do so, legally and through the proper channels.
Well, first, can you give an idea of the numbers in this community?
In this community,
Yes.
we're not sure. We know that there are 6,000 Latinos that are, documented in the census, but that in no way, shape, or form really accurately, tells the story, because we have folks that don't trust the system, who are documented, who already are underreported. So
when you say documented, you mean
who have status, who don't fill out the census, for example. So we have 6,000 that were recorded through the census. However, there are other minorities, not just Latinos, who don't necessarily feel that there's a need or that they are being heard, and so they don't fill out the census. We don't condone that, but that's just the reality. I mean, historically, minority communities of color just don't trust the system and often don't feel that they are participating or that they will be heard even if they do participate.
Filling out the census may not be specific, not filling it out may not be specific to any particular
group. Right, so we don't have the numbers, and we don't record that data. We don't ask people who come into our center if they're documented or not. We know by, the services that we can and cannot provide once we start assessing their needs. So we're not sure, but we do know that it's probably higher than other communities. We work with communities like White Plains and
About how many people do you service?
We serve 4,000.
4,000.
Right, and so we would say about 25 to 40% of our clients, for example, would qualify for DAPA, which is Deferred Action for Parents.
Now that would
citizen
be
children or resident children.
That's what I refer to as the IAEA.
Right.
President Obama's executive action from the fall?
It's commonly known as DAPA.
DAPA, okay.
And so that's Deferred Action for Parent of Childhood Arrivals?
I think parental accountability.
There we go.
Deferred Action for
parental accountability. Sounds very serious.
Yeah.
Okay, now you mentioned something about coming out of the shadows. Guisela, can you explain what that means?
I think first is that do we have the trust to tell our story and to be able to tell our story to impact whether that's legislation or any changes that can happen around us. So for people who are undocumented here, that's very difficult to come out of the shadows because when they have in the past, their stories are either distorted or misinterpreted, and there's also this already big stereotype about undocumented people that they see on a daily basis, whether it's on the news or what they hear from people, and so there's a lot of exploitation that people have been exposed to that keeps them in this under the radar. I don't want to talk about my status. I don't want to put my family at risk. I don't want to put myself at risk of either being deported or further marginalized. So,
and is that changing?
I think that in some ways it is, in the fact that young people have really taken to. We can't live in the shadows if we want to actually make some change. They also have the advantage of having the language and not having a language barrier to tell their story. So they have really been this, at the forefront of coming out of the shadows and saying, we have grown up here, we consider this a country that is ours, and that we would like to really tell our story so that there's change, and also that our families are not separated, which is something that in the Obama administration that has been very pertinent. There have been a lot of deportations and separation of families.
Recently, since
he has been in office, he has actually
deported more than
any other president.
Today, the Huffington Post today posted something related to Martin Luther King's celebration about the civil rights movement, and some have posited that immigration reform is the civil rights movement of the 21st century. One person was quoted here saying they were fighting for equality, and that's exactly what we're fighting for. Do you think that it's a civil rights movement?
So it's sort of a tricky question. If we just think about just immigration and what the symptoms are, I guess, of why we would need a civil rights movement and what people are doing, we can say yes, easily, right? So people are denied due process. People there's a lot of workers who are under slave conditions that people just don't know about. So there's a lot of symptoms that are similar to many of the abuses that African Americans suffered, and certainly, like I mentioned, the young people have really been making a voice for everybody and making this an issue that people can get behind. However, if we say that it is, we also dismiss the fact that the civil rights movements for African American is not complete and the dream is not complete. And so it should be actually something that all of us care about changing in this country, the race relations and that aspect.
Okay. Karin, as the lawyer, I'm going to ask you the question, because civil rights typically come out of the Bill of Rights, the 14th Amendment, which refers to citizens.
That's exactly right.
So given that, can this really be a civil rights movement?
Well, I think as a legal matter, it can the constitutional principles that underlie the civil rights movement can definitely be generally applicable to the rights of all people. As a legal matter, it is a unique feature of immigration law that the law really lies outside the Constitution for historical reasons, and that's a very important reason why immigrants are so marginalized in this country.
Is it all immigrants, or is it just the Hispanic immigrants?
As a legal matter, it really is all immigrants are vulnerable because people don't have a constitutional right to be in this country. They don't have a constitutional right to enter. They don't have a constitutional right to stay unless they're a U.S. citizen. In fact, if you're a U.S. citizen and you're married to a foreign national, you may have a right to be married to that person, but you don't have a right to have that person with you in the United States if, in fact, they're inadmissible or if for some reason they need to be deported. So the fact that somebody's not a citizen means they do not have access to constitutional protections the way everybody else does.
Okay.
We have a question from a viewer who remembers the problems with day laborers in the village of Mamaroneck. And the question is, how will executive action affect the day laborers?
Well, I'll take that. So executive action, DAPA, and expanded DACA, which is the childhood arrivals, but expanding those provisions so that more people are eligible, will affect some younger day laborers who might have arrived in their adolescence and they've been in the system and they've, and so there's a lot of eligibility criteria that people have to meet. They have to be able to prove presence in this country. But also, it mostly affects parents. And so if those day laborers have children who are residents, legal permanent residents, or citizens, then they're absolutely eligible for some sort of relief, which is deferred action, which is not any kind of pathway to legalization.
Do you mean if their children were born here?
If their children were born here or have legal status, right.
There's something I would like to add to that, too, is that it will have an impact on day laborers and other possibly marginalized workers in this community and any other, in that if you're granted this interim benefit, you can get you have some form of status. You can get a social security number and you can get a work permit. And that is very powerful for people who are working in low-income jobs, because many times we all know that those workers are exploited. They're often not paid wages. The wages they do, they often are working in unsafe and dangerous, unsanitary conditions, and they're afraid to complain. And people who are legal here and who can work legally feel more empowered to do so.
Okay. Was there another question, Mike?
No, not yet.
Okay. From what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, this isn't just a border issue in the border states who are there's an issue of people coming in, is what I really mean. There's a question of people who overstay.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between someone who's come legally and then stayed beyond their permitted time?
There's a technical legal distinction, excuse me.
Is it treated differently?
It is treated very differently for some purposes within immigration law. People who enter without inspection often have no possibility to change status once they're in the United States. That is different from people who entered legally, that is with a visa issued in their own name for a limited duration and they stay past that time. Those people have very limited opportunities, but still somewhat broader than people who just cross the border. And that's has been a very big issue in recent years as the border has become harder and harder to cross. because of the stronger enforcement capacity on the border, people tend to get frozen in one place or another.
Sorry, I would just add to the, if you are talking to the community and to immigrants, there really isn't a difference. The reasons why they migrate are still the same. Why some come with a visa is because it's a matter of luck in many of the Latin American countries that we see in this area. And so for them, it's the same. Staying because they had a visa and they say that the necessity of work and to support their family is still the same. And so those who risk their lives crossing the border is the same. Fear that people who come and say, well, I have 6 months and I will stay, then I will still be undocumented. So their daily reality after their visa expires is the same. They are treated the same and they are seen the same way.
And I think,
by society.
If you don't mind, I'd just like to add one important point, which is that people shouldn't get the impression that it's terribly easy to get a visa. It's extremely difficult, particularly from individuals from a Latin American country. It can be virtually impossible for people even with family here or for any reason to get into the country with a visa. It's not an easy thing to get. So I don't want people to form the impression that there's these easy alternatives and some people just choose to break the rules. It can be virtually impossible to get one.
Since DACA, Guisela, have you seen a difference? Is there a change?
Well, I would say that for young people, they also were able to become more critical of how policy is instituted. So many of them were very excited initially that this was something that they can apply for and be granted a permission to stay and be able to enroll in colleges. And I think that once they come close to the expiration date of when they have to renew, there are new fears that come across. You know, if I don't get my renewal, then will I be able to continue school? Am I going to lose the employment authorization that I have so that I can pay for school? And so a lot of new layers came into the picture. And so I think the change is that young people and their families became a little bit more informed about what the impact of policy and why they needed to sort of advocate for themselves.
Now,
Go
ahead, add something.
Just one point, like the difference, you were asking the difference between those who have expired visas or outstay their visas, and I think historically we don't think about some of the impact or a lot of the impact that the U.S. has had on a lot of these nations from which people are migrating from. If you look at how people are coming in, if they're outstaying or overstaying their visas or coming in undocumented crossing the border, you can see a strong correlation between people who are crossing without a visa and kind of like the intervention, the U.S. intervention in those countries and how dilapidated their economies are.
So it's economic.
Today. Absolutely economic. It's family reunification. It's violence. You know, I was actually in a delegation that went to El Salvador, and we got to speak to families, and we got to speak to government there in Central America, in El Salvador, and we talked to families and people who are really afraid for their lives, and so they're coming in really looking for asylum, right? And
but they don't qualify for asylum?
Well, they do and they don't, right? And that's where Karin comes in. It really depends, and so we really need to be looking at this a little bit broader, and it's not just about, you know, if you're outstaying your visa or how you're treated afterwards, but why people are coming in, right? And it's not just economic, but it's also.
Let me ask, and I don't know if anyone has the historical perspective, but is it any different than the immigrants who came in around the 1900s or the 1920s or the 1940s?
Are you talking about other
just
nationalities?
Whoever.
No, well, I think I'll just speak and then other people respond too. I think the reasons, the push and pull factors that play into the reason any group of people starts to immigrate to the United States is pretty much all the same. Historically, populations may differ, but the goal is the same. The same is to build a better life for my family in a country that holds itself out as a democracy that protects human rights and that has broad opportunity for people who are willing to work hard and follow the rules.
There have been times throughout U.S. history where we have invited populations from groups of Latin American workers. I mean, we still do in some professional areas where there's a scarcity of people with that skill. But I think it's for Latin America, it's a unique relationship because we're so close. And so, you know, when the U.S. has needed the help, they bring it in, and then immediately it's a very abrupt way of, you know, closing the doors for a lot of people. And so, right. And so, you know, if we really go back in history, you know, the territories that are now the U.S. were originally, you know, Mexico and things. And so people have been pushed out of territories. And so we dismiss those historical factors. And when we talk about, you know, who was here first and now, you know, now they're crossing the border and there's this wall that separates it and it's visible. But I think that for Latin America, there's a uniqueness there because we are so close and because we've been invited and sort of never been able to speak. Because we're called on for employment purposes, we don't want to ruin that relationship. So we just go back to our countries and hope that they'll let us back in.
Can I add to that? Just
Go ahead.
really quickly. Also, our economy has changed. So Eastern Europeans were able to come in and maybe work in a factory, right? As my mom did. I mean, she's not Eastern European, but she worked in, and she was able to move up. You know, there was upward mobility, even with very little education, and that's not the case anymore.
Right.
You really need a strong educational background to do well in this country today. And so the folks that are coming in, the vast majority of the folks that are coming in who are undocumented tend to come in with low literacy levels, low educational attainment, and so there's a real mismatch, but yet they're needed, right? The demand for that low-wage labor is there.
But why then do they want to come if they know that they don't have the educational levels needed for this?
Because the demand for their low-wage labor is there. It exists, right? So people don't come to Mamaroneck because they can't find work. They come to Mamaroneck because they know they can get a job as a housekeeper or a day laborer who does landscaping, or, you know, they have enough money saved so they can partner with someone and open up a business, right? I mean, the possibilities are endless, and I don't want to sit here and say it's just the day laborers that we're talking about, but yeah, so I mean, I just wanted to point that out, that the economy is very different, and people will come and they'll take the risk, and the risk is huge, right? This is not, you know, it's not a wonderful, joyous journey coming here. People risk their lives. They risk being raped at the border, men and women alike. And so people take that, they make that sacrifice because they can find work here and they want a better life.
Do the people who come here want to be citizens?
Yes. Oh,
and you can all answer. You have different perspectives.
I think that from the communities that I've worked with, families, and there is, because there's a group that says yes because they have children here, they've started a family here, and they still see a lot of problems back home. But there are also the group, and I will say a lot of the laborers who don't want that. They want a permit to be able to work here and then to be able to go at a certain time back home where they've probably built something to live with their families. And
there's a lot of debate about guest worker visas, for example. There's a long history.
What kind of work?
Guest worker visas. So it's work permits and it's cyclical migration. People come in as seasonal workers legally, and then they go back to their countries. And I mean, I think, you know, we would all enjoy that. I would love to, you know,
spend the winter someplace
go to Mexico and then come back for, you know, for work. And it's been like that. We had the whole bracero era in the 1940s and 50s that brought in hundreds of thousands of seasonal workers, right? But the borders are now a lot tighter, and the politics are different. We're coming out of a recession, so there's a lot more anti-immigrant sentiment, and so things are not as easy. But that's another thing on the table. We really have to look seriously at our guest worker visas and quotas from each country. And I think maybe some of you can help me with that. But you know, it doesn't make sense that we have more visas, you know, granted to certain countries and not the ones that are in close proximity that bring in the low-wage labor that we need, right? It just creates a black market for that labor.
Let me ask you about English. There's a lot of people come here and they don't learn English, which is the language of this country. Is there a reason?
It's not officially the language of this. It's
I don't think it is, and also that's true. That's been true historically for all immigrant groups. I know the parent.
I don't know. My grandparents learned English.
Well, you know,
and in the same way, I can tell you there are neighbors in this area who are Italian in descent and never learned the language, and yet, you know, they're homeowners and they were able to.
Well, and also, as a historical matter, I mean, I think we have to look at the context in which some older population groups.
We won't talk about older because I mean, we mostly understand that at a certain point we're not going to learn another language.
Well, no, I don't mean older in terms of age, but I mean in the early 19th century, 20th century, excuse me, when there had been a large surge in migration and the quota system was first implemented to really tamp down on the amount of Southern and Eastern Europeans mainly coming into the country, there was at the same time a big Americanization movement, and that's when my father's family came in, and there was a real push to have people learn English, to stop eating foods that were considered ethnic, and it was a real policy.
Right.
I mean, that would be disfavored at this time, but I think people were under a lot of pressure to not
they wanted to blend in.
Well, they didn't have much of a choice, you know. And I think now people likewise don't have. There's two things going on. One, there's not the same push towards integration.
I think the people that we work with, they want to learn English. They want to be able to help their children with homework. They want to be able to navigate the internet. They want to be able to get more job opportunities. There are some barriers, and you know, just speaking as a Latina, you know, born and raised in this country, who's still treated as different, that can also be an obstacle, right? You learn English, you go to school, you know, you get your bachelor's, and you think that all of a sudden you're going to be seen as American, and that's not the case, right? You still ask, well, where are your parents from, or where are you from, or you know, what country, and you know, that accent, where is it from? So it's like you're never truly accepted, right? So you can go ahead and take the steps towards assimilation, integration, whatever you want to call it, but you're still not fully accepted in this country, and that's still a battle, particularly for Latinos of color and other minority communities.
We have another question. And this is refocusing us right back to Mamaroneck and Larchmont. And this viewer wants to know, what are the challenges that Hispanic community faces in Mamaroneck and Larchmont? The same as you've been talking about in general, or are there any specifics?
Do you want to start? Okay.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Guisela used to work
yes,
in the community, and she grew up in this community. So,
I didn't know that.
So we could just bounce off of one another. Okay. There's a long list, but I think for me personally, just working in this community for 6 years, I've seen there's a lot of isolation because there's a huge disparity between the have and the have-nots. There's a very, very wealthy population here and then low-wage immigrants, and so that creates a huge gap and very little safe spaces for people to get to know one another and learn about one another, right? And so I think there's a lot of isolation. We know that, you know, affordable housing is concentrated in certain parts of the community, so that lends itself to these pockets of poverty or low-income communities. There's a lot of fear, I think, in the larger community of what will become of Mamaroneck if people continue to come in. And this happens, you know, you see this with parents in the school districts, for example, well, fear of, you know, property values going down. So there's some of that happening that affects every, you know, piece of work that we do or integration that we're trying to work towards. And then there's the fear on the part of the actual immigrant, whether they're documented or not, being an immigrant in this community, which is just living in fear of not being accepted, whether you're undocumented or not feeling part of a larger. I think that there's a lot of effort going in, especially at the school district level, a lot of resources and efforts going in.
That's what I was going to ask you,
actually. For sure. And we work very closely with the school district, but there's still that fear, right? There's a lot of mixed status families too, right, where the kids are pretty integrated and they're doing really well, AP classes, I mean, really stellar kids, and their parents are undocumented, right? And so there's a lot of that as well. So I think that the fear is still there, right? Even though the family may be doing well, there's still fear. There's still, you know, fear of the unknown, and again, living in a community where there's just a stark difference between two different populations. That's just a piece of it. I mean, there's obviously a lot of need for social services, educational programs to invest in the work that we do at the Hispanic Resource Center, but also Washington Rural Housing Alliance. There's all these, you know, different areas of work that need to, that we're essentially going to be investing in this community. But a lot of it, when it comes to just thinking about relationships in this community, is a little bit of, there's a lot of fear, actually, not a little.
From both sides, what you're saying?
From both sides, yeah.
If you have to define it as sides.
I would go back to like the mixed families. I think that because of many of the factors that Zoe mentioned, that, you know, this is a wealthy community and that's visible in the school districts, that the mixed family the statuses is one thing, but also in the way the kids are then assimilated in a community, and the parents may not be. And so there's a lot of differences or divisions that begin to happen within the family. The kids, can be independent. They don't have a language barrier. They have access to education, and a lot of things happen as a result of that. And so it could be very detrimental to the family. There could be a lot of trauma within the family. And so I would just add as well that growing up in Mamaroneck, and then going to college where other Latino kids came, there's also, because of that push for assimilation for the younger kids in the school district, you're blinded. You're not really in touch with your Latino culture. If it's not just for your family, you have no idea how to identify that way, and so you begin to adapt different parts of culture, and you don't feel like you're from there or you're from here. So there's a lot of psychological effects to living in a place like this, which we don't really talk about.
Right. So being bicultural is hard enough, right? But living in a place where class is so different among the 2 or 3 different kind of segments of society that exacerbates kind of your feelings around just being different and living in 2 worlds, because class is the third factor.
Is this harder for the kids or the parents?
I think there's difficulties in different ways for both. And it's, for me, when I was working directly with families, it was very heartbreaking to see the amount of pressure that just society puts on this particular family that's under one household. There's a lot of different things that are, for the parents, it's can I continue to put food on the table, and how do I keep us in this house? I had clients who told me that from Mexico they had heard the name Mamaroneck because of the school districts, and so they made the trek here, and knowing that they could have that, and they didn't know the rest that came with it, which was the ability to find housing, affordable housing in this area, to secure work, the transportation. And so that's also a unique aspect of Mamaroneck. There's access to a lot of places where they can work, where people can work, and so people come here for that, this particular neighborhood for that.
I just wanted to ask, there's another big population in Larchmont, the French, who also hear of Larchmont all the time in France, for the schools and everything else. Does any of this apply to them, or are they completely apart from what we've been talking about, the difficulties that...
I'm assuming here, but my understanding is that the vast majority of those families come from well-off. They have the means to kind of circumvent some of the things, the hardships that the low-income families that we're talking about.
And are they relocating here, or are they just here for...
I think for
work?
From what I understand, they come here and for a few years, and their families are working here, and a lot of them go to the French American school. And
it's a temporary thing.
It's a temporary thing, and they go back. And from what I understand, again, the vast majority have enough resources that they can then,
And I think the difference in the community is that they really come into a community that's already established and preserving their culture. Whereas the Latino community comes here and they feel like out of play, like if we continue to really honor some of our traditions, or, want to set up that enclave here, that they'd be looked down on.
In what way, I'm sorry, in what way are the French set up in the community already?
They go to French American.
Okay,
there's a school, and there's an acceptance of keeping their language.
Right.
There's an acceptance.
Only in school.
And I hear it all the time anywhere that they're going.
Shopping,
yes, you do hear French being spoken in Larchmont.
And we hear Spanish spoken in the stores in the village of Mamaroneck and the town of, all over. Right. So I'm just trying to understand the difference.
They're not questioned about why they won't learn English. So it's,
we have an email.
Oops. Okay. I'll just read it. As a Latina resident or worker in Mamaroneck, how did you feel when Alyssa Miller referred to Hispanics as people needed to raise our kids, wash our dishes, do landscaping? What does it say about politics in Mamaroneck and their relationships with the Latino community?
Okay.
Don't all fight for the question.
Right. It's a hard one. It was disappointing. Our people come from different walks of life, and we have a lot of strengths. a lot of potential, and we contribute to this economy and diversity in this country in so many different ways. I mean, I have actually numbers in terms of our purchasing power. For example, our purchasing power in 2012 was 1.2 trillion. And it's expected to be 1.7 trillion by 2017. And so, you know, it's really disheartening when we're described as one thing or the other. We're really diverse in terms of race, ethnicity, our potential, just like all human beings, right? And so I think, you know, it was disappointing, but I've worked really closely with the school district and with other nonprofits, and I think that there are really good intentions and a lot of resources going into working with the low-income community here. It doesn't mean that it's perfect. I've come across situations where people were treated very unfairly, even, you know, last week, and things that we need to remedy, that we need to work on. So I don't know that that comment was necessarily, you know, indicative of how everybody feels. I don't think it's fair, you know. We've worked really closely with the mayor and with other elected officials who've visited HRC, who've had conversations with us about our needs and what, you know, what we need. And so it's not, you know, let me stop there.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute, which I'm sure you love.
Okay.
Both of you actually, were speaking about people come here for employment because there are opportunities. And they're not high-paying wage opportunities. In fact, aren't they the opportunities that Ms. Miller was discussing? Is that what?
Not all.
Not
Yeah,
all?
Right. So here's the thing. Like, for example, if we're talking about the community that we serve at HRC, it's pretty diverse. But yes, the vast majority are low-wage workers, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong in saying that.
No.
I think people should be proud to say, yes, I wash dishes and I do this work, and it's, you know, dignified work in a lot of different ways if you see it that way, right? So I don't see a problem, but to say that, you know, the vast majority of the people are doing this work or only, you know, worthy of doing this work. Not that she said that.
She didn't say, right.
Right, not that she said that,
right.
but there's already a lot of hate and fear, not just in this community in the United States, right? So we have to be careful because then we're perpetuating the stereotypes, right? That people that are coming in. So I speak to you, right, and not knowing where you stand on all these issues and telling you the truth. So a lot of the folks that are coming in today that are undocumented are low literacy, but it doesn't mean that that's the only thing they have the potential to do, right? And so they start with this job and then they build their own business. As you can see right on the avenue, there are a number of different Latino-owned businesses. If you look today versus 7 years ago, a lot more than there were, right? So I think we can see the changes little by little.
All right, and I think that most of the, in particular for that comment, it was about she's a representative of the entire community, and so the question was geared about how she was going to represent that community, and she took it to, you know, an inability to vote, and so it sort of had the connotation of like, well, then I don't need to worry about, but we know they're here to fill a certain role, so they're not being viewed as a community.
We were actually discussing. I want to take us back to immigration reform, which rather than Latinos, because that really wasn't the top per se.
Right.
And let me ask you, Karin. I know you want to say something.
Well, I've been wanting to speak
Go ahead.
to.
Sorry.
Well,
All
no,
right, go
no,
ahead.
don't worry. I wanted to. Well, you can ask first, but I just wanted to add to the conversation about as soon as we started talking about mixed status families and parents who are undocumented and children who may be citizens, they were born here, right. You can have mixed status families where even the older children are undocumented, and I wanted and loop that into the broader topic you were discussing about the fears and marginalization that can be in the community and that are very palpable here, and how important DACA and DAPA, or IAEA, I believe, are to helping to resolve, because a lot of times these marginalization is very tied to the concrete realities of people's status. For example, with French immigrants or French visitors in this country, what they have that other parts of the immigrant population in the United States don't have is the ability to leave and re-enter on their own terms. And when you have that, your experience of this country, how you're perceived, is very different. They're, again, getting back to the class issue, they're wealthier, highly educated, empowered. There's a real increasing divide, not just in terms of immigration, but generally in the population. It's widely discussed between people who are wealthier, more mobile, they're more associated with international mobility, ease of mobility, no problems for them to get a visa, and you know, that's fine. I'm very happy for them, but that's a very different experience. DAPA and DACA will, provided they go forward, will empower mixed status families who are at the different end, a very different end of the financial spectrum and the immigrant mobility spectrum, which these two things correlate, to get a driver's license and to get a social security number and to become really more, as real practical matter, functioning, empowered and more robust members of the community. Because I'll stop talking, but let's not forget that you need to have those things to get a driver's license. And that's a huge thing.
You know, I was going to ask you something completely different, but I actually want to ask, I'm going to completely change. I want to, can someone describe the reality of being here undocumented, the things you can't do, the things that you know, on a daily basis? Because I think people don't, I know I don't.
Can't drive.
Technically, you can't work. You can't work, you can't drive.
You cannot drive. You can't get a driver's license.
You're not eligible for insurance unless you're a minor. Health insurance.
Health insurance.
Health insurance. You're not eligible, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
Public entitlements, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, when we say you can't get a job, that doesn't mean that people don't. And so, you know, I think Zoe had mentioned before, it becomes, you know, having to live with this concept of I have to do this work, I have to protect whatever little I'm being paid.
It's a lack of choice.
So very,
I have to feed my family.
I have to feed my family, I have to do whatever it takes. And it's dehumanizing. You have to sacrifice a lot of your dignity many times. You can certainly forget about feeling empowered. Those are a daily reality. So we can't talk about just the logistics of it on a daily basis. We really have to talk about the trauma that happens on a daily basis to a parent who comes home from 2 or 3 jobs where they've been told, you know, here's a pay. At times parents travel or someone can travel to work and then the person is sick and tells them, you can go back home, I don't need you today, I'm sick, you know, and then they send them. They don't know what it took not to drop off their kid in the morning and take 2 buses to get to, and then walk in winter time to just be told to turn around and go back and not be paid for the day. So those are very real things.
You're susceptible to.
And it is different than for other low-paid workers?
If you are able to, if you have documents, you're able to get a driver's license. Who, you know, you can drive yourself there, and so it
only
doesn't
if you
feel
can
as
afford a car.
If you can afford, but you know,
I will say that
but
workers.
you can get a job where you can drive.
Right.
Sorry.
And you can still work, right? I mean, you can work, you know, as they say, under the table in Spanish. That doesn't sound so nice in English, but you know, you could work
off the books,
right? In English, right? but you know, you're susceptible to workplace, you know, more susceptible to workplace injury and exploitation and not being, you know, and wage theft, not being paid, and you're willing to make that sacrifice because one, you're afraid and you can't get legally, you cannot get work, and so you're willing to, you know, endure those conditions, and so it's still happening, but I brought that up because I want to also specify that it's really interesting, right, that the Department of Labor protects these workers, whether they're documented or not, right? And you can still pay taxes, you know, and so it's like, so the IRS will say, well, you know, you're not supposed to be here, but you can pay taxes, right? Which means that...
How does that work?
Well, so you can file taxes even if you're undocumented.
So,
okay?
but
you are protected by the Department of Labor workers' rights and, you know, worker protections, even if you're undocumented.
So you're entitled to minimum wage?
Yes.
Wage and hour rules apply. You're entitled to back pay, but that's right. Oftentimes people are intimidated, but definitely there's big federal immigration law is very different than other types of law.
But if you don't have a social security number, how do you pay taxes?
There's a lot of discrepancy.
I mean, this is the kind of nitty-gritty.
With an ITIN, with an individual taxpayer
so
identification number.
You can get that even if you're undocumented.
You file for your taxes and then you apply for
an ITIN.
Right. And that doesn't trigger...
No, because it's not you're not using, there's no fraud. You get an ITIN with your name and you can file taxes. You can't work with that because you're not supposed to be working, but the IRS is happy to take your money.
Taxes.
and you file it with an ITIN.
And
actually, that's a big portion of the budget that no one talks about.
Exactly.
The amount
so they
of
really
money.
are paying income tax.
Yes,
yes, absolutely.
I have a statistic.
Okay,
a lot of our, just before your statistic, before she gives you the real number, I'll tell you that a lot of the Social Security fund is funded by a lot of what our workers are paying into and never see any benefit to.
I'm going to let you have the last statistic because we are actually running out of time.
So undocumented immigrants pay $662,000 in taxes to New York State. They did so in 2010, right? And so that's only $660,000 in 2010. So I'm guessing that's, I mean, our population is increasing so rapidly that it's more, and these are undocumented immigrants, right? And so these are discrepancies and conflicting messages that we're getting at the federal level, right? So one federal department says you can pay taxes, it's okay. We'll just turn a blind eye to the fact that you're working. And then another one will say we'll protect you even if you're undocumented and you can file for, you know, wage theft and win, you know, thousands of dollars sometimes, right? But then, you know, immigration and customs enforcement and saying you can't be here.
Let's not dismiss that those who qualified for the deferred action for childhood arrivals are young kids who are working. This is a temporary status, and so they are now working and paying their taxes and paying into the system. And if this is not a renewed program, if another president comes in and finishes the program and no immigration reform is passed, these kids have contributed to our Social Security and have never seen the benefits. And in New York State, they've never even seen the benefit of being able to get access to financial assistance through the TAP program, which is an entitlement program. So we're robbing these kids of a dream here, and they're contributing. So they're doing what we're telling them, what the country is saying: be a good citizen and do everything the right way. And so when people do that, there's no ability for them to get any benefits from it or any stable pathway to
Yes, and that's important for people to know that these actions have not led to a real pathway to legalization. And a lot of folks, even the Latino community, think that the DREAM Act was passed, and it wasn't. We need comprehensive immigration reform. These are just deferred action, exactly what it says. It's just some
order, not a step.
Very temporary relief.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up. We could go much longer, and I would like to thank our guest, Zoe Colon, of the Executive Director of the Hispanic Resource Center, Guisela Marroquin, who works for the New York Civil Liberties Union, and Karin Anderson, an immigration attorney, also with PACE Law Center.
Yes, my thanks to you as well. I hope you'll come back and we can continue the discussion.
Thank you so
and
much.
You folks stay right there because there's more Local Live coming right up.
Yeah.
This week in sports, the Rhinebeck girls basketball team had a healthy lead on Hastings when senior Kayla Puglisi helped put the game out of reach with a steal, basket, foul, rebound, and another basket, all in a matter of seconds in the LMC Varsity Sports Play of the Week.
Fouled and one for Lucy. She kind of stole it, shot it, and got fouled all in one motion. Not good. Rebounded by Puglisi and puts it in. 30-12, Rhinebeck. They've broken this one open. Kayla Puglisi scoring 4 straight points for Rhinebeck in a matter of seconds.
The friendly village of Mamaroneck is well known for its diverse community. Today, Julie Perez, a Zumba instructor in our community, shares her story.
Julie is a person of few words, but her dancing does the talking for her.
My name is Julie Perez. 30 years old. I'm originally from Guatemala, and I came to this country when I was 16 years old.
At the studio, she takes the dance floor, and people of all ages follow her rhythm and enjoy her energy, while also losing a few pounds.
Her Zumba class already had a following, but the moment she was here, since it is just a family, and it's become just very much a big part of Mamaroneck.
Actually, my wife started doing Zumba about 3 years ago, and it took her about a year to convince me to get into it. So I've been doing it for about 2 years. I like it so much, and it's the best way to keep you healthy.
I have lupus, and then I have fibromyalgia and autoimmune diseases also, but when I came and I feel so alive by dancing, I just thought it was unbelievable, and just the feeling of feeling strong and just happy at the end of the class because you achieved the actual momentum of the class and burning the calories, and I lost a lot of weight.
Other than their love for dancing, many of the class members share common immigrant experiences.
I came to the U.S. about 30 years ago. Yeah, I've been lucky so far. This country's been so good with me, and that I have come a long way too. When I first came, I knew no English, and now I work for a big company in the city.
I'm Mexican, and I was an immigrant from Jalisco, Guadalajara, Jalisco. It's like the story like everybody else, you come as an underdog. My parents, right now are very successful business owners in their show. They work really hard, just like Julie is doing.
Follow your dreams, go for it.
Julie's advice is to not give up, follow your dreams, and do everything for your family, as her mother did when she decided to immigrate to the United States.
The best legacy I gave to my kids was bringing them here, because it's a country of opportunities if you really believe in them.
Persuaded by Julie's energy and the people that she has inspired, I decided to join the Zumba party. For the Local Live, I'm Sasha Mollis, signing off.
About 4 million people may benefit from President Obama's new executive order on immigration. The Hispanic Resource Center, a local nonprofit in our area, organized a workshop to inform the community about the eligibility requirements.
Today, our immigration system is broken, and everybody knows it. Families who enter our country the right way and play by the rules watch others flout the rules.
On November 20th, 2014, President Barack Obama announced an executive order that will help crack down on illegal immigration. It will offer temporary legal status to millions of immigrants who fit certain standards. On December 10th and January 5th, the Hispanic Resource Center for Larchmont Mamaroneck organized a workshop to provide information about the requirements to gain legal status from this new executive order with an attendance of about 150 people. Janet Roland has been working at the Resource Center for about 10 years, and she explained to us more about their initiative.
It's the main purpose of the Hispanic Resource Center to bring awareness within the Hispanic community, because in any immigration executive action or immigration legislation impacts our community directly.
The order is offered to undocumented parents of U.S. citizens who have resided in the country for at least 5 years. It expands the 2012 Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program that allowed immigrants under 30 who arrived as children to apply for deportation deferral. Immigrants older than 30 now qualify as well.
Isn't a green card. It's not a pathway to citizenship, but it does allow them to get a work permit that's valid for a period of 3 years. Based on that, they could make an application for a travel document, and of course they can get a social security number and a driver's license, which is really important to life in this area.
Even as we are a nation of immigrants, we're also a nation of laws. Undocumented workers broke our immigration laws, and I believe that they must be held accountable, especially those who may be dangerous.
This order, although temporary, will be accompanied by passing background checks, which will prioritize deporting felons, not families. If eligible and granted access, taxes must be paid.
Yeah, because the Hispanic Resource Center has already provided 2 different workshops, one in a smaller scale and the second one in a much larger scale. And we have been able to bring attorneys from PACE community law practice to provide information and to respond to questions that are common in the Hispanic community of Mamaroneck and Larchmont.
The most important thing I would say to anybody who's considering applying is that it's important that you be an educated consumer of legal services, that you get information about this new change in the immigration rules from someone you can trust, and that's like a good community-based organization like the Hispanic Resource Center, and that you have an individual consultation with an attorney that you can trust.
People who qualify will have to reapply every 3 years. About 4 million undocumented immigrants would be directly affected, and 3.5 million undocumented parents of U.S. citizens with 5+ years of residence could gain protection. For The Local Live, I'm John Schifano, signing off.
Our pet of the week is Lacey. At only 8 months old, he is just a puppy. When he is fully grown, he will be 10 to 15 pounds.
If you want to adopt Lacey, you can contact New Rochelle Humane Society. Just log into www.newrochellehumanesociety.org.
That's it for this week's Local Live. For more information on the stories aired, you can visit our website, lmctv.org. If you have any questions or comments, email us at thelocallive@lmctv.org.
And if you'd like to volunteer, please email our senior news producer, Shayla Navarro, at snavarro@lmctv.org. As always, I'm Anthony Carlo.
And I'm Sasha Mollis. We'll catch you all next time here at The Local Live.
Tell us what you think. In person, over the phone, online. Watch and hear yourself on TV. You tell us, we air it. This is The Local Live.